For our next lesson on the basics of sociology, we need to have our first little foray into theories, because what's coming next, the next two lessons, you have to know this first. We need to know a little bit first about feminist sociology, because to recall the details of this theory. Conflict, a fight, gender, patriarchy, misogyny, I'll explain those words in a moment, hegemony, socialization, you should know what that word means by now, maternal, mother, sexuality, and violence. So let's have a quick recap of the previous lesson first on cultural diversity. Read the questions. If you don't know the answers, look in the previous videos or your notes so you do know. Right. So, if you're a feminist sociologist, you think that life is a conflict, a fight between the genders, male and female. In this conflict, men have won and convinced women and men that this is the natural state of affairs. Men are in charge, men have leadership, and that's called hegemony, where you lead the culture, where the culture is organized to suit you. That is referred to as hegemony from the Greek. So, remember, it's dominant of the culture. Men have won it, and they convinced women that this is the natural state of affairs. Let's have some examples. So let's look at the history first. This is a woman wearing the scold's bridle. It's clamped to your head. These things go in the mouth, sticking into the mouth, so you can't speak. The woman will get sentenced to wear this as a punishment for a certain amount of time for the crime of raising her voice to her husband in public. Yeah? You shout, you lose your temper with your husband. This was the punishment the court gave you. Now, there's no punishment for a man shouting to his wife. There's no punishment for a man beating his wife. This is all perfectly legal. A woman shouts at a man, she gets a skull bridle. Yeah, that's hegemony. Moving on to today. A classic thing that a feminist sociologist would point out, that in our country, domestic duties. That means cooking, cleaning, childcare, shopping, ironing, that sort of stuff. Domestic to the house duties. I point out that in our culture, women still do most of this stuff. If they were paid minimum wage for that work, they would earn about £30,000 a year, and in fact, they earn nothing. So again, to a feminist, that's an example of hegemony. The world's been organised so that women do this work and don't get paid for it and think that is normal. Yeah? So feminist sociologists talk about a system where men are in charge as the patriarchy. A system where men are in charge is the patriarchy. Sometimes it's so harsh it becomes misogyny, the hatred of women. So if you look in history, when witches were punished, witches is a code word for women, for the crimes of, I don't know, being single and knowing stuff. Yeah. Until 1991, the law said a man could not be prosecuted for the crime of raping his wife. Until then, you couldn't, if you're a man, you couldn't rape your wife. If you raped her, it wasn't a crime. This is an example of patriarchy. So, how is this done? How does all this stuff get into people's heads, women's heads? Well, it's mostly through socialization. Little boys and girls are socialized into all this stuff. Yeah. So little girls play with these toy kitchen sets when they're younger. So they learn that this is normal for them. Dressing up toys, little girl, nurse, little boy, doctor. Who's in charge? Well, doctors are more important than nurses. These are all examples of how feminists say the culture socializes males and females into the hegemony of men. Something else they might look at, feminist, it's called the Bechdel test. You can run it yourself. Watch a movie. Does the movie have two female characters who talk to each other during the movie, and what they're talking about is not a man? So if they talk about something other than a man and two females, they pass the Bechdel test. Hardly any movies pass that test. Hardly any. So you watch movies after movie after movie, and most of the characters are men, and women are in there. They're not talking to other women, and if they are talking, they're usually talking about a man. Now, what happens to females who will not go along with all this? If a female in our culture won't play by these rules, well, they are punished, aren't they? If they're lucky, they're called a tomboy. More likely, they're called a dyke. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Yeah. And that's the punishment, the social punishment for not going along with the patriarchy. So what is feminism? Well, let's have two things here. Number one, feminism is not women hating men. That is rubbish. It's not that. Feminism, very broadly, is the belief in equality. You believe that males and females should be treated equally. And feminist sociology is looking at the structures in our culture that stop males and females being treated equally. And in lessons, we'll have a look at these questions.